It's turn! What's up, Vincent Valentine EX Turk? Welcome at Army of Archfiends to Final Fantasy segment. And while I'm rocking this awesome green Taco Bell drink, green shirt, green instant I lit up. Well, except the color of the instant's not gonna know in the back could you get it. But anyways, we're gonna be talking about Final Fantasy VII and what it meant for most of us, and and a little bit of history of Final Fantasy VII. 1997, when the PlayStation 1 era. Let me check out my glasses. My glasses is kind of foggy. Okay, 1997, when the PlayStation 1 had, 1995 is when the PlayStation was, being launched. So Final Fantasy needed a new game, and Nintendo 64, and the Nintendo 64 cartridge it'd be, let's see, it'd probably be at least about up to 5 cartridges to fit the Final Fantasy VII game onto the thing. That's why instead it'd be cheaper to make 3 discs to help the story, and much easier to help the story. No offense to Nintendo fans and Nintendo supporters. Nintendo's great, but not for a game that's as big as it was at the time. As a kid, I grew up on the N64. I played Final Fantasy VII as a kid when I went to my cousin's house and got stuck on Midgar. Now, 1997 is when Final Fantasy VII came out. This was a game that was supposed to surpass the previous title, Final Fantasy VI. Or should I say, if you live in America or Australia, Final Fantasy III, which was really Final Fantasy VI once they finally got the numbers right, because they got all that whole numbering bullshit happening in this country, so it just didn't turn out like that. But anyways, yes, it came out on the PlayStation 1. Most of us remember this as our favorite Final Fantasy because it brings out our childhoods. It's if you were to combine the properties of Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time with the Matrix, with I'm trying to think, Star Wars, and even Galeon, all those properties at once. It was not just only an adventure RPG with a guy with a big man sword, or that lives in a time period where Metropolis advances, or the Metropolis advances and technological advances around the world. But it's also made you have to think deeply. This also puts some biblical things into it, such as if you see Sephiroth's final form with the 6th wing. There's actually a biblical prophecy that had, the thing with the 6 wings. I think it's like an Armageddon type prophecy, but they have that, and then also the Corporation Greed as Shinra. Shinra, if you really think about it, Shinra kind of predicted a little bit of the future because we see more of that. But corporate greed ruins the world. What was once the beautiful world of Gaia is destroyed by man-made technological advances. Sure, the people that were rich and can afford it, the people who are rich and that can afford it, lived happy, comfortable lives through Shinra. But the ones who live in the slums got to live with all the sewers and poisonous gases and all the worst things ever. Which, if you really think about, Final Fantasy VII kind of mirrors the real world, and the aspect that if you lived in the slums of the hood, your life wasn't all that good. Whether it's just crime infected or it's just dirty and no one cleans it up, and the rich people don't give two shits about what happens to you in your situation. Which Final Fantasy VII was one of the first games to actually push, push some controversial narratives. At least back in the times in the 90s. Not just only mentioning what happens in the hood, which is the slums, or corporate greed, when corporations, corporations still run the world today, but it was more controversial back then. It was a controversial topic back in the day, and also other controversial topics like back in the 90s, before we had our LGBT rights, about a man cross-dressing. Yes, he was cross-dressing to save a female friend from a sex trafficker, which again was very strong, mature topics in a kid's game at the time. Even though it's rated T, it was technically kids were playing this. So it was kind of a shocking game because it had biblical stuff in it, corporate greed, the slums, ghetto, and sex trafficking were the big things that happened in this game. Because if you didn't know, when you had to go save Tifa, one of the people who work under Shinra secretly was in a sex trafficking ring. So it was very controversial. Wasn't afraid. Was one of the very first Final Fantasy games that was not afraid to push people's buttons, to make people feel stuff. Also, it was not afraid to make us attached to the character we know as the Flower Girl or Eris Gainsborough. We started feeling so much for Eris Gainsborough, so to even push our emotions to the highest surgency, they had the main villain kill Eris, which got us all enraged and involved and angry. We wanted to level Cloud and everybody up, so when we came to fight Sephiroth, we put it into Sephiroth. But it wasn't afraid of pushing things that people got emotional about. It was not afraid of being politically correct. In fact, there was actually a scene where Tifa called Barret a retard when he was going to the elevator. In fact, it wasn't afraid to be what it is. And that's what, like I said about Final Fantasy, is art. That's why. It was one of the pioneers of Final Fantasy, besides Final Fantasy VI at the time, and then the later games right after, that pushed serious topics, but also keeping the fun-filled adventure. It still had its fun-filled adventure. And even the original, without the remake of Final Fantasy VII, even the original is still playable by grown-ups today. Now, people who don't play RPGs, like turn-based ones, probably won't play this, but anyone who's open up for any games, this has so much replay valuable. Even now, I'm using the PC version you get off the PS4 for this video as proof that it's still playable. Even in today's standard, it's still playable. Not to mention, Final Fantasy VII was so successful. It was one of the most successful Final Fantasy games ever since 6. Final Fantasy VII also has good spin-offs. Had the movie Advent Children, which was 3 years right after the events of Final Fantasy VII. And then at 3 more years, Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus, where Vincent Valentine plays as the main character and the main hero of a much darker controlled world by Deep Ground, or should I say Shinra, because it was still part of Shinra. Shinra has finally ruled the world in Deep Ground, and Vincent Valentine has to win it back because, well, if you really look at it, if you really go look at the symbolism of Final Fantasy VII Dirge of Cerberus, Deep Ground were actually Nazis, so you had to stop Deep Ground from doing what they were doing. So none of any parts of the series was dark, and it also you are also playing a fun-filled adventure, but also was able to get a deep storyline. And same thing with the prequel Crisis Core. Thanks to Tabitha, we grew emotionally too attached to Zack Fair's. Even though we know he's gonna die, it was still sad. Even when we know it, because that's how Cloud got his sword. Tabitha made the prequel Crisis Core sad and dark. It was about military desertion, and, questioning what our beliefs are. Final Fantasy VII was about stopping corporate greed, and an angry deity type person. Avid Children was to stop the past, was to get rid of the past and move on to the future. Dirge of Cerberus was pretty much a dominated rule by a tyrant ruling the world, and had to be taken down. So each Final Fantasy game came with the 7 games, Final Fantasy games, and Final Fantasy VII movie, and even fan-made novels that were made by lots of fans. Like there's the Livestream.net and N.J. Gallagher novels, and etc., etc., etc. More material. All the material was dark, but it was also deep. So you didn't just play a fun-filled adventure as a kid. You also got to think about the world. You got to think about the world in a more philosophical things. Even the characters themselves had philosophical views in life. Philosophical, philosophical thoughts and stuff like that regular people go through. Whether you think you're somebody else, whether you think you're as tough as you are, whether you lost a loved one and you blame yourself for it, whether you have a crush on this girl or guy and they never notice you, but it was never afraid to push grown-up themes in a kids game. So it was in a way where where it's not over the top where it got kids bored, but later on when they go back to play it as grown-ups, they start to understand the storyline and like what it is, because it's fun-filled, but it got you to think about the world in a much broader scale. And just like Final Fantasy VI, it was not afraid to be controversial, and that's what I liked about it. And now let's go to the active time battle systems. Now, active time battle system, I think, don't quote me on this, but was created in Final Fantasy VI. But they elaborated and created a materia system where you can use magic. So you just equipped an item and you can use that magic, which was very wonderful, which I hope they go back to for this magic system in the remake. I hope in the remake they go back to that system on materia. Now, not the battle system, not the combat system, but the materia system. You equip something to make you use magic. But yes, we all remember this as the dear Final Fantasy game we all love. Now, most people remember 8. Most people remember 6. Most people even remember 10. Most people even remember just 9. But as for me, I remember Final Fantasy VII was officially the first game I've ever played in the series, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was one of the best things ever. Now, I'm going a little bit over time in this video, so may the crystal be with you, Archfiends, and have a good day. And comment below what this game meant to you, what Final Fantasy VII has meant to you. Don't forget to comment below what Final Fantasy VII meant to you and your dear into your hearts, and why it plays a huge role in your life. May the crystal be with you, and see you guys.